So why is it so difficult to make a promise? And for some people, it's not even making a promise. For some people, it's keeping a promise. What's the problem with that? Why can't people just promise and do what they promised when they promised?
Because shit went bad in the past, and now I can make another promise that isn't gonna go through, and let some more people down.
So
No.
it's about letting people down. It's about oh, I'm not making a promise, because if I make a promise and not do something that I promised, then I'm letting somebody down. So I'm just not going to make a promise. So that means you can't rely on the person whatsoever. And if they make a promise, then they're vested in it. Right? It's a stressful situation. It's a very simple example, right? So I'm talking to my colleague, and we're discussing, or we're working on the business plan, and he seems to be a kind of guy that if you ask him anything, he would be able to, he'll do it. You know, you ask him to do something, he'll do it. You ask him to do some research, he'll do the research. You ask him to create a flow chart, he'll be the first one at the starting gate. But the conversation was about making a video. So both of us are looking to create informative videos, and basically start a conversation around certain topics that are very uncomfortable. And so I said, you know what? How about we each promise to make a video? And we had 4 or 5 days. And so what ended up happening was I started a video and started to have technical difficulties, and it didn't happen, even though I wrote a script and actually started the introduction, and basically about 4 minutes worth of work, and it didn't really go anywhere, so I trashed it. Then when I was talking to him, he actually did it. But what I found out is how difficult it was for him to keep that promise. He told me that he had to take a day off from work just to fulfill his obligation, so to speak. And he was stressed out for days before then. So it makes no sense that a grown man could not keep the appropriate perspective on something that is relatively simple. Of course, I know it's not simple, because
The simple thing to do is to not make the promise.
well, it's easy not to make a promise.
Exactly.
Then you don't have
So
to.
it's
You don't
very
even have to
difficult
deliver
for
it.
him.
Some people don't make promises, and then they deliver anyway. Which I know a number of people that, well, I'm not going to promise that I would do it, but I'll try, whatever that means. And so then
I think,
sometimes they end up.
it's like when you're not believing in yourself. You're not trusting yourself. You can't even rely on yourself to keep that promise.
I think you just refuse to commit to doing something, because once again, a commitment means that you're going to put everything aside, important or otherwise, and do what you promised to do. You deliver on what you promised. But it does bring a good point up, that if people are afraid to commit, if people are afraid to promise to do anything, how is anything supposed to be done? How is anything supposed to get done? You know, I always say that you either have results or you have a bunch of excuses. And so a promise is a good way to make something happen. And so, as much as possible, as difficult as it is for some people, it should make it a little easier, at least to create something, to make something happen.
When do you think that people stop making promises? Like, at what point in your life is it because so many failed promises in your childhood or teenage or college or adult life? Or when do you think people have come to that point where they're just like, I am not promising another thing because anything could happen. How could I promise? Anything could come up. I could say I'll be there at 3 o'clock and I could have a flat tire, or my car won't start, or whatever.
Well,
so when does that start where you're like, you just stop promising?
Well, I think you stop is because, you either promise and for whatever reason it didn't happen. I think most people have bad experiences in school because they are forced to promise. For example, you're forced to do your homework. You're forced to take a test and do well on it.
So it starts early on.
I think it starts very early.
You get a bad flavor for it, a bad taste for it.
Right. And one of the things that I feel is that you have to accept that maybe you did break your promise, and that's another thing that a lot of people have a hard time coming to grips with.
Yeah.
They'll come up with all sorts of excuses instead of saying, you know what, I didn't do it.
Right.
And okay, that's fine. Take responsibility for it. No need to come up with a bunch of excuses and this didn't happen because of that and it was traffic. For example, today when
you were late picking up the kids.
No, when Katyun, when she came in, I think she got there by 3:30, right? The first thing out of her mouth was, "Oh, there was so much traffic."
Yeah, I know. That's
Right
what
away.
Ellen DeGeneres says it. She's like, "What do you think? I took a helicopter here?"
Yeah, like when
Like,
somebody says that there's
like
traffic.
there was traffic.
No,
Like, there's always traffic.
you were late picking up the kids because whatever, but
'Cause
it
you
wasn't
always
traffic
are.
because you always are, right? Because right, you can't you don't know how to manage time, and that's another thing is that inability to manage time. People make promises, they can't manage their time, and end up breaking those promises. So then they stop making promises, and they still can't manage time. So I guess that's
Yeah,
one
you
way
got a
of looking.
bunch of liars and broken promises.
Bunch of liars and broken promises. Traffic, excuses,
And
whatever it
liars.
is. Just a bunch of excuses. Anyway,
Bunch
so
of letdowns.
I think the key here is really to make a promise and commit to making this happen. And if for whatever reason it doesn't happen, take a look at some of the reasons that you could actually have control over in the next time you make a promise. And at the end of the day, you have to accept the fact that it didn't happen. You made a promise and it didn't happen. Commit to making a promise next time. And just accept if you do fail that it just didn't happen. There was no excuse. There was nobody to blame. Didn't happen. So
But even
that's the
though
key.
you're saying all that, today when you weren't able to make the video, you were a little bit like, because my wife's made me use the GoPro and my wife and blah blah blah, and it was such an excuse.
No,
but
you're right. But at the same time, I did say that regardless, it's a bunch of excuses. I didn't do it. It wasn't done.
yeah, I know you did take responsibility for it, but
That's it.
even somebody who's a professional at taking responsibility for their broken promises,
Yeah,
it has a difficult time not coming up with
has
excuses.
absolutely. I actually remember an interview with Deepak Chopra, and he's one of those people that is such a respected expert, if you will, as far as how to deal with things, how to manage life, basically. And I remember him being interviewed, and how I think it was his son who was interviewing him, and as he was doing the same thing, trying to find excuses for reasons why he didn't do this or didn't do that. It's just natural. It's natural from the time we're little kids. It's an excuse. It's I didn't do it because. And so as adults, I think the key is to learn to accept responsibility. I failed, and next time I make a promise, I'll stick to it.
So harsh.
Very harsh, but
Failure.
I learned that with our girls. If I make a promise and I do whatever it takes to make it happen, and then if it doesn't happen, I take responsibility. I couldn't make it happen. I'm sorry. Next time, I'll make it again. I'll make the best effort, and I'll make it happen. I think I accomplished that 9 times out of 10. So I'm good with my
Minus the
children.
balloons.
Well, the balloons didn't work, but yeah. But it's just really being able to accept what happens. Period. End of story. And that's it.
And I think once you've made that promise, though, there's this drive inside of you that's like, okay, I made a promise. I haven't made a promise since 5th grade. like, I'm going to make this promise, and you do stick to it. It does give you a more sense of responsibility around that promise. Like, you want to do it at that point. It's not just, oh, I might do it. It's, you know what, I made an actual promise. Like, I haven't said pinky promise in 25, 30 years. Like, it kind of feels good to promise something and accomplish it and actually carry through with it. And the sense that you get from making a promise and delivering that promise feels really good.
Well, yeah, and I think I experienced that with my children, and even my mom, who doesn't really care what she promises because she made a bunch of promises to me and didn't deliver on it. But to the girls, I promised them ice cream, so I want to give them ice cream. Okay, I don't want her to break her promise to my children, so go for it. But it's just really, if you promise, you have to be, I think, really serious about making that promise and committed to making it happen.
And it's okay if you're like scared to make the promise, but go ahead and make the promise, because it might give you the courage that you needed.
Absolutely.
To commit to it and
yes, to make it happen. This is why it's important to promise things to your friends, to your family, just so that they hold you responsible, and for them not to let you get away with, oh, it's just him, oh, it's just her, she always promises, she never delivers. No. Hold them accountable. Hold the person. If you don't hold the person accountable, I think you're just as responsible as that person. Mm-hmm. You have to hold them accountable. So they know you're not, it didn't just go in one ear and out the other. It's stuck. You promised. I counted on you. You didn't deliver. That's it. Don't make them wrong, but make them accountable. Or have them be accountable. And, yeah. So, on that note,
get out there and make some broken promises.
Make a promise, and don't break a promise. And then when you break a promise, take responsibility. Peace out.